Good afternoon, everyone. My pleasure to share with you today the results of the recent survey that we've done with your inputs, and some of you still inputting. We got some more completes this morning. Thanks very much. It would have been really handy if we'd had them yesterday, but it's good to hear what everybody thinks. What I want to do is kind of share with you some of the feedback from the survey, because it's a year, more or less a year, since we had a similar gathering to this, following on from a similar study. And so what we're going to do is share with you the results, fairly similar structure to last year. Again, obviously to see what the trends are and to see what the story is. But we've added in a couple of new elements because, of course, the debate has evolved in the past 12 months. We had just over 50 responses from senior leaders and directors, 83% of whom actually do business with the UK. So we're really hearing it from the people in the front line of a lot of the changes that we're talking about. So what are we hearing from the survey? Well, when we first polled you, a matter of weeks after Brexit last year, we said it was early days. Well, it still appears to be early days because one of the questions that we asked was thinking about the impact of Brexit on sales for your business over the rest of the year into next year. Is it clear what the impact is going to be? Too early to tell, or you're just not sure? Well, last year, 88% of you said it's just too early to tell. But in fact, this year, this month, 72% of you are saying it's still too early to tell. Albeit 19%, so 1 in 5 are saying that it's already clear what the impact of Brexit will be on your sales performance. So that's kind of just a snapshot of the perception. But one of the other things we wanted to get a sense of was, well, how worried are you? Now you can remember, or maybe you can't, a year ago, panic. You know, everybody's wondering, what's this all about? What's going to happen? So the question was, well, on a scale of 10, how worried are you? From 1 is extremely worried, 10 is not at all worried. Last year, average was 3.6, so pretty worried. This year, a little less worried, 4.7 on a scale of 1 to 10. So what's that telling us? It's telling us that, I suppose, well, the sky hasn't fallen, you know, there's been a few ups and downs, and people are sort of saying, we're not quite sure, but, you know, it's okay so far. And I think that's kind of an interesting response to that. But ultimately, what sort of impact is it going to have? Do you expect Brexit will have between now and, say, the end of the year? So last year, between mid-2016, end of 2016, this year, mid-2017, end 2017. And what you see is that it's pretty negative. So a mildly negative impact, that was 44%, 54% if you add in fairly negative. So over half expecting it to be a negative impact. It's still over half. In fact, it's gone up a little bit, closer to 60%, saying it's going to be a negative impact. Still some saying neutral, a couple of maybe positives, a few don't knows. So on balance, the perspective is one of pretty well a negative impact, mildly rather than fairly negative. So it's not catastrophe, it's not the sky falling, not the end of the world. People just saying, you know, it's hard to see a positive silver lining in all of this. So yeah, the default is it's going to be negative. But that said, and I think this is important, so Brexit's out there. It's a phenomenon. We hear about it. We're dealing with it. But the question really is, in the midst of all the other things that are happening, economic trends, Trump, European Union, Eurozone interest rates, all of that considered, and just the domestic market realities in Ireland as well, over the rest of the year, to expect your sales this year to be up on last year the same or down. Well, last year it was actually a much more bullish outlook. 67% of you, 2/3 were saying, in fact, we expect sales will be up on last year, 2015, the obvious comparison. This year is a little bit more modest. 53% of you, so still the majority, expect that this year it's going to be up on last year. So growth, good. But there's been a big jump in the percent who think it's kind of going to be the same as last year. 26%, a quarter of you are saying, actually sales will be pretty well the same as last year. So what's that telling us? I suppose it might signal a few headwinds. It might signal that people are modifying their outlook, their expectations, that perhaps there's a degree to which not just Brexit, but the wider context of uncertainty and unpredictability is starting to influence the outlook, the psychology perhaps of sales leaders like you, decision makers, your colleagues and your peers in organizations. And maybe there's an expectation that eventually that penny has to drop, something has to happen as a consequence of Brexit. And it's reflected a little bit in this somewhat more cautious, somewhat less bullish outlook compared to last year. All of that said, that's kind of the perspective of now, looking ahead. People are still planning for growth. There's still a growth dynamic out there, perhaps not the one we expected a year or more ago, but it's still a growth dynamic. So again, the question was asked, have you already made changes to your sales plans and activities as a result of Brexit? Well, actually not really that much. Sure, it was only a few weeks after Brexit last year, so only 1 in 10 had actually changed or were about to make changes. That's jumped to 1 in 5 of you have actually made changes or are in the process of making changes. Whereas of course last year there was a higher expectation of planned or possible changes. But the critical factor here is that half of you, just over half, are waiting to see if change is necessary. It's the same as last year. It's kind of sitting on the fence, not really quite sure what this means. Yes, maybe a little less bullish about the consequences, a little more negative based on there's hardly a positive in it, certainly for Irish-based sales organizations. But the majority of you are still saying, wait and see. So what does that mean then for growth? What are the kind of changes that people have made or might make as a result of Brexit? Well, as you saw, most people are waiting to see, so not surprisingly, no changes are planned right now for the majority of you. Some, though, heading towards 2/5 are planning to change their sales focus, so change their market, so maybe orient away from the UK, and remember the vast majority of our respondents are selling to the UK. But I think the biggest change is actually in the sales targets. It's around turnover, revenue, sales, forecasts and projections. That's where we've seen a significant shift in terms of the mindset or outlook a year ago, where it was kind of like, just keep on going, growth is coming, there's momentum, but the momentum has ebbed to a degree. And I think that's reflected in the attitude here, which is, we're probably modifying a little bit, curbing our enthusiasm, maybe setting the bar a little lower post a year after Brexit and in the context of all that's happened. And of course, inevitably, there's a sense that it's going to impact on headcount. 7% talking about a headcount reduction, only 1%, obviously only a few weeks ago after the event last year. But I suppose the interesting question is about that wider growth dynamic, the momentum that certainly carried us through last year, is carrying us through this year. Where's that going to go? What's the mindset, the mood, if you like, at the moment around some of this? So the question we asked last year and this year, same question. If it becomes clear that the effect of Brexit will be to slow the growth of the Irish economy to a lower but still positive growth rate between now and the end of next year, what will you do? Well, the vast majority of you will just continue with your plans, with your growth ambitions, just as they were before Brexit. So I think that's itself encouraging. People are saying, you're saying, that you're still sticking to the plan, you're still investing, if you like, in terms of growth momentum, you're positive about where you're going to go. But over 1 in 4 are saying, actually, you're going to reduce your sales and growth plans. Now remember the context of the question. It's still going to be growing, but it's going to be growing more modestly for the future. What will you do? 1 in 4 are saying probably, you'll tack differently in response to that slightly different growth outlook. 1 in 4 saying you'll reduce growth, sales and ambition. So hints are, or signs are, of businesses a year after Brexit starting to look for ways of responding to it, not battening down the hatches, as some were kind of emotionally inclined to do a year ago, but certainly responding. And I think the key task here, the key challenge here, and the one that kind of is a day-to-day reality in the work we do at Amoric in terms of our survey work and our research for our clients, is about customer reaction. So we've had the sales leader reaction, but this year we added in another question. And the question was, what effect, if any, would you say Brexit is having on your customer confidence? And I think this is intriguing. 64%, nearly 2/3 of you are saying that Brexit is having a slightly negative effect on confidence, but no significant changes to customer behavior yet. But 1 in 10 of you are saying, well, actually, it hasn't just affected their confidence negatively, it's actually affected their behavior as well. And then the rest are saying, maybe positive, don't know, a little bit. But I think this is critical. I think this is telling us that the people you're selling to, your customers, be they other businesses or be they indeed end consumers, you're seeing or anticipating a psychological response to Brexit and wondering ultimately is that going to translate into a behavioural response, a negative behavioural response. And that may, I think, inform or explain some of those kind of more hesitant, tentative attitudes that we've seen in the survey in terms of sales forecasts, sales projections, growth momentum, and so on. And you know, stepping back from the survey you've helped us complete of sales leaders, there's a few other snippets that we see in our regular research at Amoric that I think it's important to factor into the discussion you're having internally or with your peers about the potential sales impact of Brexit. So, for example, in a recent survey that we updated, we asked 1,000 adults in Ireland, has the UK vote for Brexit made you more cautious about your own decisions to spend or borrow? We asked it literally a week or two after Brexit last year. Last year, 37% of Irish consumers said yes. Big shock. I'm a lot more cautious. It's fallen this year. We updated it only a week or two ago. 32% said yes after Brexit, and all the noise since has made me more cautious about spending and borrowing decisions. Most of the time they're saying general decisions. But a lot of the kind of gloomier forecasts haven't manifested themselves. So, for example, a year ago we asked the question, well, will cheaper sterling make you more likely to shop in Northern Ireland, for example? 45% of people, nearly half of the adult population, said yes, but actually it's fallen quite sharply. Just 31% said yes in our most recent survey in May. But there are, I think, really important shifts happening, maybe a little bit below the radar, that I think are starting to shape some of the consumer market trends, in particular in the Irish marketplace. 64% of Irish consumers have shopped on a UK website in the past year. And of those who do shop on UK websites, which is the majority of internet shoppers, 40% of all their spend is going to UK websites. This year, Irish consumers will spend about 7 billion online, but a big chunk of that is now going outside the country, the majority of it, in fact. Even one little indicator, 42% of those who shop in the UK, again, the majority of internet users, are using parcel motel, UK address type services, Address Pal with An Post and so on. So it's just an indicator, a sign of interesting shifts in Irish consumer responses to some of the inevitable consequences of a 15% depreciation in sterling. And it's working the other way too. And I think this is what's interesting, even just as a bit of an anecdotal indicator, but we've never had so many queries from UK companies contacting us about researching Irish consumers. So clearly there's a lot of businesses now thinking, a lot of businesses in the UK thinking about Ireland and the Irish consumer market, the 100 billion euros they'll spend this year, as a very interesting and attractive market. So to sum up, a year on, It's certainly clear that sales professionals, leaders and directors are still resilient in the face of Brexit, but certainly also more cautious. And I think that that's something that we see coming through quite clearly with, I think, significant implications in terms of the types of investment decisions that people will make, the types of growth outlooks and planning people will do as well. But most are still waiting to see what it means for the longer term, the medium to longer term consequences. Though a few of you, a significant, maybe a fifth, are already seeing the effect, responding to the effect quite deliberately. But I think the customer dynamic is now key. If those psychological concerns, confidence, it's just psychology, but if the confidence on the part of your customers, be they businesses, export clients, or just consumers in Ireland, for example, if those psychological concerns lead to negative behavioural changes, including switching to UK channels and brands and shopping abroad and all of that, then I think we will start to see that sales resilience severely tested. So thank you for your attention, and again, thank you for your participation in the study.
All right.